Hi everyone, my name is Annie, and today we'll be switching over from frame animation to Unity's 2D skeletal animation. Iteration 1 for these guys was done with a sprite sheet I drew up in Procreate. It was pretty cute, and the general goal was to create a little animation for every action a creature could do, which resulted in not that bad of a framing, but I ended up swapping because I wanted a smoother visual with an easier ability to modify for new animation clips as I entered into more complex creature behaviors. I ended up making a side, front, and back base profile with individualized body components that I could then rig up and animate. I ended up swapping the color palette too while I was here, but I enjoyed it a lot more than the other one, so I brought them into Unity and set to work laying out the bones for each body. If your image looks fuzzy at all, I'd recommend changing the same settings as you see here for crisper art. Now, the first set of bones ended up being pretty time consuming, considering it was my first time doing this, but after a bit of time and a lovely tutorial by Danny Crossing on YouTube, which by the way delves into rigging from PNG files for us poor folks without Photoshop, I ended up getting it working. The main takeaways from this point in the bone animation are to make sure each bone has the proper associated influences. These are the pieces that move when that associated bone will move. Make sure to name your root bones for ease of access, otherwise you'll have bones 1 through 39, which sucks. Make sure to properly set your depth values. If you have an ear that's in front of the head and then one behind it, you're going to have -1, 0, and 1 for your associated depths. And lastly, auto-generating bones usually works fine, just make sure to normalize it after, because the weight of your rig cannot equal 0. So, it got working from here, and once I was happy with it, I repeated the bone process for the other creature views and tediously set to work animating each base walking cycle. During this time, I ended up watching nearly 50 episodes of One Piece, so big ups on the mental boost of serotonin that said I was working even when just watching anime. Take that unemployment. Once I was happy with how they were looking, I separated them into 3 game objects under Parent Animator Game Object. This is because the animators are going to have similar clips, like eating, sleeping, attacking, etc., but from a front, side, or back profile. These game objects are set active and inactive based on the direction the creature is going. The end of this video will touch upon the beginning process of animation state machines, but for now the main focus is to get the proper animation set up based on these creatures' directions. The animation class you see here on the right is relatively simple. It contains references to each animator game object, and then the animator component on that object. As the creature's direction changes, it will swap which animator is active. Right now, that doesn't do much within the actual animator, but this space will be very important for switching triggers and animation parameters later on. The direction value that's passed between the creature script and the animation manager script wasn't originally calculated in the best manner. Direction can be defined as the difference in x and y between 2 points, so originally I compared the creature's current position to the waypoint they were targeting, since their current pathfinding is incredibly minimal just towards the player. I swapped over to comparing the previous and current positions of the creature instead, and then normalized that value to get a directional vector too. Big fan of regions. They make organization so much better. It was at this time that I was facing a bit of issues, but I set up all the necessary references within the inspector and launched into debug mode. So this calculate direction void here is just determining which direction the creature is going in based on that dir value that we calculated in the creature script. Now, a bit of an I spy here. You might have noticed there are 4 instances of a number 1 that doesn't quite fit within the void that I was calculating. So, in my defense, it was pretty late, but those 1s instead of 0s caused quite a bit of a detour for a little bit. The iterative process here was mostly solved by changing the directional comparison values to 0 from 1. But I also set a conditional comparing the x and y values of the directional in order to calculate which animator should have priority in diagonal movements. While it isn't explicitly coded anywhere, That number comes out to roughly 45 degrees as the line between the sprites switches. The last little part of this process was proper handling for right and left views, which was a very easy swap. The x value was compared to be either positive or negative, and then the sprite renderer.flipx was set to true or false based on that. I also upped the creature's speed to make the movement seem a bit more fluid with the animation. I do enjoy how it came out, and I believe the process will be easier for elemental variants moving forward using this as a base. Stay tuned to this creature creation series to see progression of complex creature behaviors and personalities, diverse elemental designs, UI UX and stat tracking, and whatever else may come up. Thanks for watching. Any and all support and feedback is greatly appreciated. Stay sexy, gamers.